Hi, so we're going to cover textures. I'm going to try to make this quick. We'll see how I do. So first things first, I want to go File, Save Scene As. I'm going to create a default workspace. Let's get this update later. And I'm going to jump up to my top level folder here. Sorry about that pause. I had to get rid of some folders there. I'm going to create a new folder in my top level, so my Art102 folder structure. I'm going to name it my last name, and this is the texture, intro, and then the date, 0916. All right, so then I'm going to click into, say, set project, and then I'm going to click into that folder that I just made. So that's the texture folder here, and I'm going to say set, create a default workspace, and then I'm going to save the scene. Number 10, textures, intro, 916, and save as. This has been important when we've been, I'm going to make 4 spheres and I'm going to apply different textures to them. So the default workspace is really important when we're doing things like importing OBJs. So I think some of the funky textures might have been, or the funkiness in the OBJ files from the 3D scans might have been due to misconnected workspace files, those preference files .mel. So once we start making image textures, that becomes super important as well. So I'm going to click on the first one. You'll notice that in my attribute editor, if I scroll all the way to the right, the last tab here, Lambert, all of these spheres have a Lambert 1 texture. That is our default texture. If I change the default texture, so if I click into the color box, for instance, here, I change that default texture, it's going to change for all of them. So you never want to change Lambert 1 because all of your default, unless you want all of your default materials to come in the same way. So we need to create a new material. There's a couple ways to do that. I'm going to go into from my modeling tab into my rendering tab, into lighting and shading, and say assign new material. I can select from my Maya materials, so those are surface, here we go, and then all of this from the Blinn, the PhongE, and the Lambert are kind of default materials, so I can assign a new material from there. So if I say Blinn, it's kind of like a half kind of shiny material, more like a plastic. I can also select from my rendering tab here. These are the same materials that I just mentioned. So this is kind of an antistrophic. So that's antistrophic is it's kind of like a brushed metal. So I'll choose that. So this is the Blinn. That is the second one. So maybe I'll just change these so that they're actually in the order of the materials. This is the this is now the antistrophic, kind of like the brushed material aluminum. This is the Blinn, which is kind of like a plastic. This is our Lambert, so I'll make a new sphere because I think polymodeling, new sphere. Back into rendering. So I'm going to leave this as the Lambert, but I'm going to assign it a new Lambert material because I don't want to change Lambert 1. So when I assign a new material, you can see over here it turns into Lambert 2. And then this is my Phong, which is a bright kind of shiny material. You can see the preview here. And then the PhongE, which is like a bright with like a little bit of like a diffuse on top of it, right? So you can see the hot spot, the reflection is a little bit bigger because there's more of a diffuse material. All right, so if I was to go into my rendering tab, I'm going to do an IPR first. Don't have any lights, so I need to add a light. I'm going to add a floor, and I'm going to, I think, probably just use a sky dome with like a spotlight so we can kind of get a sense of the difference between these materials. So I'll quickly add a sky dome. That's also in my Arnold tab, sky dome. And then I'm going to add from my rendering tab, add a spotlight. And move that up and rotate. And I'm going to move that. And quadratic. And intensity 1000. And I'm going to change my viewport shading to use all lights. And now I can go into my rendering tab, my IPR, and see what this looks like. Okay. So you can see these kind of like shinier materials. Let's see. I haven't given much to work with in terms of the reflection. Maybe that I should put an HDRI image on the sky dome. So instead of the color, remember, I'm going to go in and I'm going to use, this is the sky dome that I've selected. I'm going to go into my little checker box, select File, select the folder, and then I'm going to bump up into my HDRI images and select my beach. All right, there we go. That gives us a little bit more. And now I'm going to just make sure I have cone angle, make it a little bit bigger so that it's hitting, and I think that's fine. All right, so now you can start to see, at least in the preview, some of the differences. The differences between the materials will really kind of reveal themselves when we start to go into the render. Okay, that's a little bit. So for each one of these materials, there's going to be a few nodes that are set by default, which gives them kind of different properties. Obviously, this is the Lambert in the middle. It's the most diffuse. This Antistrophic, you can start to see, maybe we need more of a flat surface. But again, it's kind of like a metal material. This Blinn is kind of like a plastic, almost, if you will. The diffuse, and Phong and PhongE are kind of like, the Phong by default is similar to a Blinn. I think it has like a little bit more of kind of a shine on it, and then the PhongE you can see is a little bit more diffuse. But you can change all of those properties by selecting each object. So I'm going to select over here in my 3D viewport. I'm going to click into the PhongE tab, and then I can see I have a lot of things that I can kind of play with, right? So let's see how Maya does. Yeah, I can bring that diffuseness up, so that kind of is going to make it more or less diffuse. And that, again, is kind of like almost like a matte. It's diffusing the light that's hitting the object. The roughness is going to add kind of like sandpaper, right? Like a rough texture, which is going to increase the diffuseness as well. And then there is let's see, this reflectivity, right? So I'm going to suggest that you all kind of play with these on your own. There is I might do another tutorial that goes into a little bit more detail here, but most of what you'll want to be playing with are these kind of common material attributes. The specular shading has to do with the kind of shininess and reflection. And let's see, yeah, I think that's all I want to talk about there. So those are the Maya defaults. So go in and play with those. In order to connect like a color node, I can select select that object. I can change the color here, right? So using the hue value here, the saturation, and then the kind of brightness value, right? The V value, HSV. So that's how you would change colors. And let's take, I'm going to shut this render view just so this happens a little bit quicker. So I'm going to select the Phong. Again, go back up into the Phong tab. So you can drive the color from the color picker here. You can also, like Skydome, select the little checker box to use a file. So I'm going to select the checker box, select the folder, and then I can even use the same image here. So, and say open. Where's my mouse? There we go. And it's not going to show up in my 3D viewport. So I need to do something called turn on hardware texturing. So for some reason, the sky dome shows up when you select a color for the sky dome, but your images won't show up on your objects until you select from shading and then hardware texturing. So you can kind of see the image in here. The Phong has almost like a pearlescent on top of it. So anytime you have a shiny material, that means that the highlights are going to kind of overwrite some of your images. So if I were to go into my IPR render now, you can see the kind of image in there, but there's almost kind of like a metallic sheen on top of it, right? You can see the reflection of the other object in here. And that sheen, let's see here. If I take down the reflectivity, and then I bring down the specular. I should have shut down the render window. Might have crashed Maya. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I bring down the specular color. The specular is kind of what gives it like the metalness, if you will. Then you can start to read the image a little bit more. If I bring up the diffuse, actually, and which is going to bring down that shine again, more of the base color is going to come through as well. Again, and the same will be true for the, wait for it, here we go. The same is going to be true here for, where is it, diffuse, translucence. No, I think that will be it for the Phong. So each one of these materials, the Phong, PhongE, Blinn, etc., is going to have a little slightly different attributes that you can edit. So if I select Blinn, for instance, the defaults here, there's like a few other kind of default attributes that are going to be set to different properties. And that's what makes a material. Okay, so that's the image texture. If I wanted to make, so some of the students had like a translucent object, I need to go into the transparency and bring transparency up. So you can see, I'm gonna make the floor. All right, so you can start to see through the object in the 3D viewport, but if I go into IPR, it doesn't show up as transparent. And that is because if I'm rendering with the Arnold tab, I need to make one more setting for translucent objects, anything that you see through, and that's under the Arnold tab, and then that's the opaque. So I need to shut off the opaque property for this object, and then for this object, sorry, make sure that you've got your, I had the floor selected there, so make sure you have your object that you want to be translucent, turn opaque off in the Arnold drop-down menu, and now when I go into IPR, it will render as translucent. So that, I think, is all that I asked you for, was translucency, an image-driven texture, and then a couple, like a different color, and then a couple other textures. So that would be it. So you could render this out and then submit to Canvas for full credit. All right, I hope this was useful, and I will go into some more details with you all in class, but I want you to kind of get familiar with the controls and how to navigate textures. Make sure you're in the rendering tab, and I will see you in class. Okay, take care. Bye.